My family travelled from across the nation to pay me a visit in Los Angeles, where I live. We thought a trip to Catalina Island would be fun in order to cope with my depression. When we arrived, it was clear that we were in the off-season. It was late November and the weather was cold, so the island was almost deserted, safe for inhabitants and a few stray tourists, like ourselves. It was time for the cold, dark trek back to the hotel after a day of exploring and having just finished dinner. After the dinner, the conversation took a bad turn and my intense depression got the best of me. My headspace went similarly gloomily. I walked ahead of my parents to the hotel room, pulling back my sweatshirt tighter around my chilly ears, told them that I simply needed to sleep. At midnight, my mother called my name as I awoke, a hushed murmur. There were 2 beds in the room. My parents' bed was closer to the door while mine was further in. My mother's voice broke the silence once more. She sounded worried about me. Given my mental state at the moment, I couldn't blame her. Groggy, I rolled over in bed. "What?" I replied. I noticed her turn to face me as my eyes adjusted to the pale moonlight streaming in through the drapes. She was taken aback when she saw me in my bed. Her eyes widened. Who was she talking to if I was in my bed? We both turned around to find a hooded figure in all black standing over their bed, where she'd been looking. How terrifying it must be to wake up on an island in the middle of the ocean with a hooded stranger looming over you. This was a moment that seemed to last an eternity. The hooded creature then did something strange and unsettling. Instead of approaching us, it squatted in the corner near where I was stood. It terrified me, because the way it was crouched was so ordinary it appeared to be animalistic. I knew 2 things. The hooded figure had been standing above us as we slept, and it wasn't acting in any way I could comprehend. The sequence of events that unfold as my gigantic ex-military father woke up happened in an instant, as compared to the limitless moments of this person standing over us only seconds before. We were out of the door in a flash, unsure which way the burglar had gone. My mother screamed, "Go get him!" My father was sprinting down the horseshoe of paths far away from the hotel, saying, "I'm gonna slap the head out of you." I dashed down to the other path heading towards the street, but there was no trace of the invader when I arrived. But there was a strange silence behind me. I dashed back to the room only to discover my father returning silently, his head bowed. I hear him exclaim, "It's a fucking kid," as he gets pretty close to me. When my parents forgot to lock the door, a young teen, tall and lanky, like me in my 20s, dressed completely in black, including a black hoodie, entered into the wrong room, our room. When he came in, my mother awoke. Seeing a tall man in a black hoodie, she assumed that he was me and assumed he was going to leave the room in a melancholy episode. And it was only when the hooded figure crouched that he recognized his mistake and became frightened. He was terrified of us. My mother stepped out of the room and hugged this boy who's now bawling his eyes out. I'd be terrified too if a hulking ex-soldier chased me down with murder in his eyes.
Am I the asshole for not wanting to be the babysitter at my friend's wedding? So I, 22 female, love babies. I've always wanted kids, but I want to wait until I'm married to have them. I don't mind watching kids at all, but I dread going to an event and everyone just dumping their kids on me just because they know I like kids. Last month, my friend and a couple of others had lunch together to plan more of her wedding. I was at work and I was unable to attend. They decided that since I was okay with watching the bride's child, I should be okay with watching everyone else's kids too. They decided to set up a daycare-like area at the venue where I would watch the kids. I didn't even know they planned this until yesterday. I told my friend, the bride, that I would only watch her kid. That's all I agreed to. She argued that since I work in pediatrics and I actually like kids, I should have no problem handling 7 to 10 kids. I told her no, I only agreed to watch her child because it was her wedding. I tried to reason and say that if the other parents were willing to pay me for watching their kids, then I would be fine with it. But she said she didn't want to make them pay for something that should be free. Am I the asshole? I kind of feel like one now because she said there are 2 families that aren't coming because they were under the impression there would be free childcare at her wedding, and she's saying I ruined her wedding. Everyone else is telling me just to be nice and help her out because she's already stressed enough.
So unfortunately, my next story time is in this hard drive. And I can't get it out of this hard drive because I don't have the adapter to connect this to the laptop. So story time right now. And yes, I have leftover eyeliner from this morning's makeup, but we're not going to talk about that. So back when I was with my toxic celeb ex, there were a lot of things that if I did, they would bother him. For example, if I stared at my phone for too long, I'm talking about like longer than 30 seconds, he would automatically assume that I was texting some guy. I know. Sometimes he would even get mad if I asked to spend time with him because that would mean that I was trying to make up for something bad I did. So one time I asked him if he wanted to have dinner. So I went to Trader Joe's, I picked up some really nice stuff. I went to his house and I made us some paninis. The whole time I was cooking, he was in his office watching stuff on his laptop. Moving on. Finally, I tell him to come have dinner and we sit down to eat. He was completely quiet. Then he asks me, "What did you do?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" That's when he told me that I must have done something really bad in order for me to want to make dinner for him. So obviously I said nothing. I just wanted to spend some time with you. We haven't seen each other in a while. You see, we would break up like every 2 weeks. And the whole time we were together, there was a handful of times where we actually went to dinner or even spent time together. The rest of the time, it was him in his office, me hanging around his house, and eventually just saying, "I'm gonna go home." So he says, "No, I don't believe you. Something's up with your face." And then I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You look different." I was like, "I can't change my face, dude." Then he grabbed my phone, started looking through it, and when he didn't find anything, he got even more upset. That's when I had to make up a lie. Like, I literally had to come up with something bad I did because he was not letting it go. And in order for me to prevent him from getting even more upset and making it, turn into something else, I told him that I had an audition. He hated when I had auditions. To him, it was like the end of the world. It meant that I was gonna go see some guy. Even if I showed him the email for the audition, he still wouldn't believe me. He even suggested once that my agent was pimping me. There are so many more story times connected to all of this. So I told him I had an audition. Mind you, I didn't even have an audition. I was just making it up. So the next day, I literally pretend to go to an audition. I stayed there for like 5 minutes, and then I went back to my apartment. He calls me to check up on me, and I say I went to the audition. It was fine. That's when he tells me not to bother to go to his house ever again. He broke up with me. Moral of the story, if you are with someone toxic, who has to control, know everything about you, who doesn't even want you to continue your career, who doesn't want you to hang out with friends, drop them. Just drop them. Also, I do have so many more story times. Do you guys want to hear them?